Hello, everybody. My name's Mark Daly, and I'm the Director of Digital Strategy and Business Development at a company that you've heard called Epsilon Telecom or Telecommunications. We're a global interconnect company. We provide network as a service solutions that interconnect the digital world, and as such, we enable businesses to simply and seamlessly access and control their network infrastructure, certainly that infrastructure required to support and elevate your business performances and really your underlying business functions. We're owned by KT or Korea Telecom, and we operate and focus on global solutions. So as you probably guessed, we partner with our friends at Westcon and Aruba to provide what we call overlay services in combination with our global underlay or transport services as end-to-end managed solutions. Today, I'm going to provide an introduction to the initial thought process around designing a simple yet intelligence-driven network strategy for businesses embracing the digital world. I'm a strategy person, so hopefully I can give you a few tips. Okay, so digital transformation is a topic we hear over and over again. I'd like to focus on a couple of areas that I think really help to set the expectation of how WANs need to evolve. The growth of not just cloud infrastructure, but also the applications that run in them has created a need to change how we design our networks. With these entities no longer in our control, let alone on-prem or even in our data centers, how can we adopt and integrate them into our sphere of control? And it's kind of giving us continual challenge, right? And as the extension of the distributed workforce continues, how do we deal with the move to smaller offices, integration of home workers, while all the time continuing to apply a consistent policy approach? That's another big challenge. And additionally, our own as well as our own employees, as well as our customers, we're all having or expect sort of more personal application experiences these days. That's leading to changed expectations on the tools and services that we use at work. It's known kind of now as the consumerization of IT. Now, these characteristics, as well as the disciplines required to operate a network, are really influencing our approach to how we define our new WAN environments. So our changing digital world is throwing up some quite specific challenges to IT and IS folks. For a start, everything's become more complex. Whereas a lot of infrastructure was in common or private areas, now it's distributed all over the place, and in public and third-party areas as well. You have network in other people's areas. Now, being able to have a common view across not just your network, but visibility into third-party services and environments has become perhaps one of the most important non-security issues you could have. And security, or should I say managing security, hasn't really got any easier in terms of consistency, management, and understanding how to defend not just your perimeter, but other companies' environments as well. Authentication to access a network is no longer a strong enough defense. And another kind of interesting challenge is the ability to access and manage the quality of experience, whether that is as a user, as a customer, or even as an application itself. Being able to not only view the experience levels, but also influence and improve them has become critical in terms of the services that IT and IS people provide. So I move on. So I think this slide just sort of tries to tell or state a message around, I think underpinning all the messages I've already spoken about is the fact that we have and are deploying our cloud services and applications, and that's fine, but have we been able to understand the implications to our networks and our WANs, and what do we need to do to adapt them to an ever-changing, digitally expanding business ecosystem? You can see from this example as well, there's a lot of talk and speak around application orientation. We need to consider that we should be thinking of our network architecture as really being one that is based on and designed on our applications, and application architecture is this kind of result. And no longer do we start with buildings and even users, but how does our application environment look? Where is it? What are the characteristics? What characteristics does it need to support and have supported from an interworking perspective? And then we look at the other apps, the devices, the people, and the sites as the next step in our design methodology. You might say we're evolving into this application architecture approach. I certainly think we do, and certainly it's a practice at my company, Epsilon. So this is fine, everything's changing, but not always our network. So this has put real pressure on our existing networks. You can see from this slide yourself, and I've already mentioned some of the limitations that we're experiencing, but just simply having more and more business functions distributed remotely drives more and more bandwidth usage. This in turn can put continual pressure on your existing network in terms of indirect traffic routing. That impacts the user experience, having to upgrade bandwidth under old and expensive technologies and pricing regimes, simply having a limited speed to do things, not being able to directly see and control what it is that you want to do, and bringing on and managing clouds and apps. It's just complicated, right? So the day of the blind, locked in, and slow to change network services from telcos has gone. It's disappeared. So what can you do about it? Well, the next two slides, I think, help start that journey of looking at what you need to do, not what you have right now, but what are the questions you need to ask. These are my strategy starting points, basically. And you'll notice that I won't be mentioning things like how much bandwidth do I need. These questions don't frame your design. This is my first toolset slide. It's the start of your own consultative approach to rethinking your network. And the application architecture approach is about starting to think about your network as a series of layers and interconnecting rings, starting with your applications. And you begin to ask questions such as, how mission critical is this function to my business? Is location actually a factor? Who accesses and what interacts with the particular application? And you can start to see these questions build up. And these questions you can see on screen, as you build this thinking out, you can then present other ecosystem components such as my users, whether they're customers, partners, or even machines or devices as part of this user and ecosystem community. So in reality, you're building out a layer of entity topology, starting with your applications, building around the applications. And this is what defines your network interaction, not building out from buildings anymore. And this is also what defines your network topologies you need to enable these interactions. And then by the end of this exercise, you'll have a logical design. You can then start to think about how your network enables this design to best function. So my second toolset slide gives you essentially the next set of things you should be thinking about in terms of your conceptual design. It gives you a series of questions and guidelines as to how you can think at the next level about building your next generation WAN solution. It gets you thinking on what do you need to incorporate into your solution. You can start with the physicality of need if you want. It is an important aspect to this second level of design, and understanding that your physical sites need a specific design for transporting your data. This is the underlay component. It's as important as any other component in the physical design of your solution. And if your road is full of potholes, your cargo gets to its destination late and in bad shape, right? It's the same with your network. So your underlay is important. And as well, how you manage the transport is critical too. The overlay service level capabilities on offer now, and Nick's going to tell you about a lot of this stuff, allow you to address many of those issues that I've mentioned already. And think about this level as how you control the transport and access of the data across the network. your controllers, right? How you present the information as it's doing so has become more and more exposed to you as a tool set you control. And what we call intelligent enablers become your RFQ questions as well. Not just, I guess, not just RFQ questions, but really guidelines for your network design. So like, what application rules and logic do I need for my app data running across my network? What threats should I be looking out for, and how do I look out for them? What pre-configured templates do I need for making fast changes? Also, does my underlay network adapt when it needs to? Can I prioritize my traffic across a common network? And can I turn up more network as soon as I need it? So summing up, think about your inter-operation transport design and what are the characteristics that an entity in your design needs, and what intelligent enablers do you need to build your network of the future? These are your 3-step questions that you should start to formulate in terms of your own questioning. So these last 2 slides are your consultative starting point for reassessing your network. So hopefully some good tips there for you. So with this slide, it's more of a summary. So you have the questions and tool sets available to you to begin to build your next step WAN design. Your overall objective, of course, is to try and achieve all the tick boxes you can see on screen, right? So enhanced performance, even all the way through to like reducing costs. Now, by that, I don't just mean sort of money savings, but also savings in operational efficiencies. That's a big driver in terms of your thought process when thinking about things like SD-WAN. Now, here at Epsilon, our role is to help work with you to design, deploy, and run a network that is built for you and the needs that you have newly defined through this exercise. So our WAN solutions incorporate everything I've spoken about to put you in the position of pilot, really, for a next generation WAN that simplifies your day-to-day networking needs whilst powering up the functionality that we hope we place at your fingertips. So if you think about what we do and how we group our solutions, we have 4 key pillars. You can see them on screen. They're intent-based SD-WAN, cloud first, seamless global coverage, and fully managed solutions. I'm going to talk to you in a little more detail about each of those. So intent-based SD-WAN and SASE solutions, it's really our smart networking tool set that gives you the power to run your own network. These are like SD-WAN and SASE solutions that boost your ability to guide your business performance through really drill down enablement, visibility, control, security, and even how you can manage different types of traffic. So my colleague from Aruba, Nick, he's going to tell you a lot more about this area. So I'll move on from this pillar. From a second point for us, and it's really important to understand the impact of the cloud and what it's doing to our businesses and how we serve our customers. And it's important to consider that the cloud is now another endpoint and entity that you need to manage as part of your own network. We can provide dedicated connectivity options that connect you directly and also within the cloud environments you use and extend your visibility as well. And you can also achieve greater security and performance, and in some cases, actually cost savings by choosing to incorporate private links. We can even increase the performance and security of your public connections. So really, really good options, particularly as you move into and adopt more and more of the cloud. From a coverage perspective, we provide MEF certified global coverage, ensuring that you can bring your network together anywhere in a single seamless global network solution with many different networking technology options. Remember, we're starting to call this network the underlay. And we knit all of that together and expose it using software-defined networking portals and visual monitoring tools that you can use yourself. So some really cool advances in how you control even the underlay. And we bring all of this together as a managed end-to-end service solution. So you can craft and define it to fit your own specific needs. You can manage it yourself, of course, or we can manage some or all of those components for you. So it's kind of the Epsilon portfolio, so to speak. And then if you look at this slide, I'm coming towards the end of my presentation, but with this slide, I'd like to leave you with a kind of a third consultative toolset slide. So this is obviously much more about what a telecoms company can offer you in terms of pick and mix options, but it helps guide you on what the specific networking, connectivity, and service options are that you should be considering when you're redefining your WAN design. And at Epsilon, the components we offer include sort of overall services that seamlessly, it's a keyword, enable higher performance, efficiency, and control. And we extend your reach into the clouds with high performance, secure connectivity options that include being able to incorporate cloud functionality or cloud networking, certainly, and its physicality into your WAN, even at, for most of you know and understand this, even at the VPC and VNet level. So you can include that networking functionality in your own network solution. And you can and should consider the different underlay or network technologies, as you can mix and match them to build an appropriate mesh network that best suits your need. Remember, mesh networks now are real options for you. And all these network elements should be underpinned by some form of network as a service SDN platform. Epsilon's platform is called Infini. And finally, understanding the managed services packages, I guess you'd call it, that are available for all elements of your networking need, bringing you specific areas of expertise as and when you need it, and end-to-end outsourcing options as well. So in-source, outsource, all options for you. And with Epsilon, you can tailor your own solution. So coming up to my last slide now. So this slide really is a kind of so what slide. Excuse me. So the so what's. Okay, what are the actual kind of use cases here that what I've been talking about is going to help with? So I'll leave you with this final use case benefits example or series of examples, and then you can hear more about SD-WAN from Nick. So we've just gone through the process of designing an intelligent network for your smart enterprise. You can see the case study benefits on this slide. This type of approach, I guess most of these use case benefits particularly relate to SD-WAN, of course, because this is the main topic. But some really good examples I'd like to highlight in terms of why you would consider and why you'd use this as a tool set. So you might have a UCaaS stack that simply needs to get an uplift in performance and quality enabled by the network. You might want to prioritize the UCaaS traffic over other traffic, or even have packet repair done in real time when you do experience poor network performance. So, you know, packet replication, packet repair, all these really awesome things that SD-WAN can do for you. You might need to deploy networking into the cloud and need it done really quickly, like in a couple of minutes. Your distributed and hybrid workplaces can often challenge security, your operational processes, as well as application performance. All these things can be challenged, and SD-WAN has shown that it can significantly improve in these areas. If you're thinking of migrating away from MPLS to SD-WAN, you can deploy seamlessly really over almost any network type with SD-WAN, right? That's really awesome. But you shouldn't ever forget that the underlay is just as important as the overlay. They're absolutely critical. And then simply speaking, SD-WAN just enhances application performance. It does it through many different features, and you'll see this in Nick's presentation. And the secondary benefit of improving application performance is improving, of course, user and employee both performance and satisfaction, right? We're using an app, it works really well, we're happy. So that's all good. And finally, SD-WAN is great for commonality of security, proactive and reactive management, and simply maintaining consistent defense policy. That's one kind of simple example, but it's that singularity of commonality that makes it much more secure and easier to deploy. So now my colleague from Aruba, Nick, he's going to go into detail on how SD-WAN takes these concepts to drive real innovation into your organization and your organization's network environment. So hopefully that was interesting. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark. I certainly enjoyed the presentation, and I think it's wonderful that both Epsilon and Aruba are able to share the room today with our WestCon friends. So appreciate the opportunity. What I will do is now just request control so I can move the slides forward myself. And we'll jump straight in. As Mark indicated, my name is Nick Harders. I am at Aruba an APJ Solutions Director. And I have been with Aruba for just short of 10 years and seen quite a number of iterations of our underlay technologies. But for those that are familiar with HPE, our mothership, Aruba is a somewhat independently acting subsidiary within HPE. And we are predominantly focused on the edge part of their edge to cloud strategy. So there was a Silver Peak acquisition just a couple of years ago now in 2020, and that rounded out our SD-WAN capability. And a lot of what I speak to today is actually going to be as a result of that acquisition, as well as complementing a lot of the wired and wireless capability that we've brought along with us over the years. So just to jump straight in and really sort of work from where Mark had indicated that we're seeing the industry move as a result of not only the pandemic in the last couple of years. I think that to some degree has accelerated a lot of the transformations that Mark touched on. What we're seeing as a next step from SD-WAN was essentially SD-WAN was in its original phases a way in which cost savings were able to be introduced to the business purely by abstracting the underlying links and looking at more cost-effective uplinks as opposed to more expensive MPLS circuits in isolation. Now, again, with a lot of the changes in the way in which people have been working, the digital transformation, cloud-first architectures, and mobile workers, what we are seeing is that really sums up into two key transformations. The first being a WAN transformation, again, focusing on using more cost-effective circuits and understanding the fact that the perimeter has changed. All right, users are more mobile. They're either working from home, from corporate offices, or really embracing the mobile workforce. As a result of that, we're also seeing a lot of the applications themselves change in that they are not necessarily hosted in static data centers anymore. And we're seeing a lot more applications migrate to SaaS applications, public cloud hosted, or in some cases, even just really a hybrid cloud environment where you may actually be moving workloads between public and private cloud, engaging SaaS where that makes sense, but also leveraging a lot of the cloud security providers that have become quite prevalent in the industry today. So across the WAN and the security transformation that this has really driven, what we're seeing is a need in the underlay to really support the idea of a converged SD-WAN fabric, right? So the underlay is essentially what you see on the bottom. These are the different on-ramps to the converged SD-WAN fabric that we provide with Aruba EdgeConnect. But before we talk about those in detail, I'd like to talk about this top row, because that really sort of gives a good indication of how the network topologies have changed over the last few years. We've seen less applications hosted in data centers, and we've seen customers very actively deploy cloud security providers such as Zscaler, Netskope, Checkpoint, as well as a large degree of SaaS applications, and in many cases migrating what were typically homegrown applications to now off-the-shelf SaaS applications. So we're certainly seeing a lot more of those types of cloud-hosted applications, as well as business-driven applications that may be specific to individual customers or potentially even verticalized. But a lot of these applications are being deployed in cloud-hosted services like AWS, Google, and Azure. Now, the idea of a converged SD-WAN fabric sounds wonderful, but the real challenge that we've seen up until now is the way in which we interconnect users to these applications, when we've just discussed the idea that users, aren't necessarily sitting in a corporate environment. They are extremely mobile on different types of devices, different physical locations, different types of network uplinks. But we're also seeing these applications hosted in a large degree of different areas. So we need to make this easy. So what we'll do through the next few conversation points that I'll run through is talk about how Aruba EdgeConnect does so. So just keep in mind the idea that we have that converged SD-WAN fabric, and the idea is that you have multiple ways to on-ramp to that fabric and multiple egress points. And the intelligence that you have in this EdgeConnect fabric allows you to understand what the user's application and traffic flows need to be, understand the SLAs associated with any of those uplinks, and we can intelligently route that traffic accordingly. Now, if we look at the underlay and the different ways in which we can on-ramp to the Aruba EdgeConnect converged SD-WAN fabric, we'll go from left to right here, and we'll talk about how this being, the more mobile use case, this is a software VPN client, which you can deploy on an agent as an agent on a endpoint device. As we move towards the right, the EdgeConnect micro branch is a single AP. All right, so this could be for a small handful of users that are in potentially a temporary space, or maybe even just a small branch location. This gives the ability to leverage the Aruba Wi-Fi and wired technologies, but also brings a subset of our SD-WAN capability directly into that access point itself. We do have some APs that actually have wired downlinks as well. So this really does become a self-contained mini office, which we've seen some customers deploy for a single user at home to bring consistency to the way in which they access the corporate network. We've also seen this utilized as a way to provide temporary connectivity in pop-up retail facilities, maybe even extensions from a healthcare perspective. And the LTE or 5G capability of these particular devices to give cellular as an option for an uplink really brings a lot of agility to that particular micro branch solution. As we move further to the right, we've got the SD branch. So this is where we may have potentially sort of 10 or greater users where you need a little bit more capable throughput. You may have multiple uplinks that you need to manage across MPLS, potentially internet ISP circuits, as well as cellular. And as we move towards the right, we get to the more feature-rich EdgeConnect Enterprise. And this is based on the Silver Peak technology. And this is where we bring a lot of the features that we'll discuss as we walk through the capabilities today. So the idea here is that depending on the use case, we have multiple ways in which you can access the converged SD-WAN fabric. And it allows us to have consistent policies that then push out and provision across that edge. Now, let's talk about just in general, as you think about building out this architecture, we've got multiple ways to on-ramp to this fabric, and then multiple egress points, data center, cloud-hosted services, SaaS solutions, as well as any cloud security providers. Again, a lot of this sounds quite complicated, but if we bring it back to just the core capability and the benefits of this core capability, you'll see consistent connectivity, right? And as Mark indicated, as a lot of the ways in which we are working have changed, one thing that has not changed is that the users of the network have essentially continually built a higher expectation of performance over time. Especially as you see working from home, typically users have, high-speed internet links at home. They expect that high-speed connectivity when they go into a corporate environment. They expect seamless access as they have on their mobile devices wherever they work. So consistent connectivity, that's really what a converged SD-WAN fabric brings to your user base. We also spoke about the importance of bringing efficiencies at the operational level, and that's by having converged QoS and security policies that get pushed out consistently across all of those endpoints. It's really important. And again, just really trying to meet the expectation of users as they access a wide variety of different applications, such as voice, unified communication, SaaS applications, and business-centric applications that are hosted in a wide variety of different areas behind the scenes. So it's really about being able to connect users to the applications in the most efficient way possible. I wanted to just take a quick moment to explain potentially some of the terminology that you may have seen in this space. And it has been a dynamic area where we've seen some of this terminology change. So Gartner first coined the idea of SASE, the Secure Access Services Edge, a number of years ago. And they've actually brought a little bit more differentiation within SASE, where we now look at SASE as a combination of the WAN edge, which today we are, of course, talking about Aruba acting in that function. And the other component of a SASE architecture is the security service edge. And this really relates to the cloud security providers that we spoke of earlier as a potential destination for user traffic. Now, the important point to remember here is that the Aruba EdgeConnect solution allows you to have multiple SSE providers seamlessly integrated into the SD-WAN fabric. And the reason that this is important is because over time, we've seen capabilities change and differentiation become apparent across these providers. And you may have a need for multiple SSE providers, or potentially through organic M&A activity, you may find yourself needing to support connectivity to multiple of these providers. We allow this to occur in a seamless way, and we also allow a lot of tight integration so that you can configure and set up policies directly in the EdgeConnect solution, and we will essentially use that integration to replicate whatever needs to be done in the cloud security provider as well. So it does actually bring a lot of efficiencies in the way in which you operate, but it also brings a lot of flexibility when you're architecting an environment to allow you to use best of breed if and where needed. Now, let's talk about some of the specific use cases of the Aruba EdgeConnect solution. We will certainly ensure that you have access to this content following the presentation, so I won't be going through these in any large amount of detail. But the first idea here is around improving connectivity. We spoke before around cost savings being a core component of SD-WAN, certainly when it was first becoming popular in the industry, as we actually embrace the idea that the underlying circuits are abstracted from the overlay or the SD-WAN fabric. The idea is that we're using a combination of potentially high SLA MPLS circuits as well as lower SLA internet and cellular circuits. Now, for us to be able to leverage these circuits effectively based on the user's application, the Aruba EdgeConnect solution brings forward error correction into the platform. And that allows us to not only use things such as path bonding and have that traffic over multiple links simultaneously, but use essentially error correction in that transport flow to allow us to cater for dropped packets along the way. So this can start to bring additional capability across some of those lower cost circuits where you wouldn't expect to see 100% delivery of those packets. Another use case here is really around sort of zero-touch provisioning and optimizing the way in which you deploy that end. Typically what we see in SD-WAN fabrics is a large number of branches, user locations. You may have single user locations, multi-user locations, and large corporate facilities. And quite often you'll need to bring these up quickly. So using things such as cellular as uplinks to expedite that network connectivity in those locations, as you wait for potentially longer lead time circuits to be installed, as well as the idea that you want to be able to bring up a lot of these smaller locations quickly and efficiently. We allow a lot of that configuration to be done in a zero-touch deployment manner with centralized orchestration of the policies as well. One thing I want to call out here is WAN optimization. The reason that this is important is because as you start to look across what was traditionally deployed in a branch office, what the EdgeConnect solution allows us to do is to bring convergence to a lot of these functions. And as a result of that, we see a lot of these areas, including WAN optimization, quite often a different box that was handling that. I'll talk a little bit more about firewall later on, but certainly routing and endpoint visibility all converged in a single appliance. Just extending that thought process a little bit around WAN optimization, we do see a lot of customers enjoy the WAN boost optimization capability, and this really allows us to deploy things such as deduplication and caching directly on the EdgeConnect appliances. The obvious benefit of that is large file transfers, and potentially other protocols that are not as efficient over slower links. So TCP-based acceleration, data reduction, NFS, SMB, and CIFS are typical protocols and file sharing protocols that we see the most improvement for this particular capability. So that's embedded in the Aruba EdgeConnect solution. Another use case that we've discussed to some degree already is really around the move to a SASE architecture. So keep in mind that SASE is essentially the SD-WAN capability, which you see on the lower left here in terms of our EdgeConnect SD-WAN appliances, and then the SASE connectivity to cloud service providers on the right-hand side as is needed for your environment. So keeping in mind that we do support a lot of tight integration with a number of those SSE providers. Another area I wanted to touch on was just the proliferation of IoT devices. So in the branch, we touched on visibility being a core competency of the EdgeConnect solution. Having visibility and understanding what is on your network is certainly one component, but being able to set policies, even east-west, which basically means on the LAN itself, we can use the EdgeConnect device to essentially have a zone-based firewall. So the idea here is that we can implement micro-segmentation even at the branch, and you'll see on the bottom right some examples here where we define certain roles of devices as they come into the network, and we allow or deny connectivity between devices that fit within each of those particular roles. So there's a lot of capability here. And you will also see tight integration with Aruba ClearPass, which is our policy management platform, to extend this into not just application, but also additional role-based capability. The last use case that I wanted to touch on was really that just a few weeks ago, Aruba was the first SD-WAN vendor to have their products certified as ICSA Secure SD-WAN. Now, what this essentially means is that we have the certification from these certification bodies that allow us to essentially replace branch firewalls. That shows the passion that we have for being security conscious at the edge, to proactively work towards such certification, and to bring credibility to the fact that our security capability at the very edge of the network, not just in terms of being able to define policy, but also execute and enforce that policy right at the very edge, brings a lot of flexibility in the way in which you architect your branch environment. You may choose to leverage our IDS, IPS, firewall, or even just URL filtering directly at the branch level, or you may choose to again engage with SSE providers for additional capability at scale. I've touched on these. It does allow you to simplify your branch architecture because you can consolidate a lot of those functions. You can leverage the SSE providers that make sense in your environment. And of course, based on the prior slide, I've discussed how you can use that as a way to secure IoT devices, as well as any employee, guest, and contractor-like devices in your environment. So in summary here, I'd really just like to call out that, HPE Aruba is a leader in many areas, including our wired and wireless infrastructure, but specific to SD-WAN and WAN Edge, we have been a leader for the fourth year in a row. And this is, of course, with the combination of the HPE portfolio, which includes that software, single AP, and the SD-WAN gateway, as well as our EdgeConnect enterprise appliance, as a result of the Silver Peak acquisition a couple of years ago. We've brought a lot of convergence in the way in which we represent that SD-WAN fabric, and we expect to see continued integrations over time across the portfolio. So in the end, we bring the highest quality of experience, really managing user expectations as work patterns have adapted over the last few years. We've grown with those expectations, and we've really looked to ensure that we can meet those by mapping users towards the appropriate applications, no matter where they reside. That, of course, brings cost savings. We're looking at branch consolidation, whether that be firewalls, WAN optimization platforms, or other infrastructure in the branch. We can consolidate that into the EdgeConnect appliance, and we provide freedom of choice. The idea here is that your environment and your business requirements will continue to change, and we have a focus on ensuring that you have what you need to be able to support multiple architectures over the life of your deployment. There's going to be more information for those that are interested on some of the topics that I've discussed today, specific to Aruba EdgeConnect and the idea that not all SD-WANs are created equal. So for anyone that's interested, feel free to pull up that report. And I hope that this was informative and gave some insight as to how we at Aruba see EdgeConnect as a part of your journey as you move towards your WAN and security transformation. I'll pass to you, Michael, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark and Nick, for the great presentation. Okay. Can you explain more how SD-WAN can benefit company mobile workforce outside the office and integrate security features provide for them to work safely? So,
yeah, I may take an initial stab at that one. So it's a great question. And, you know, I do think that as you start to look at users that are outside of the office, it really drives home the idea that the perimeter has shifted and we are expecting more in terms of security policy defined and then enforced at the very edge of the network. And a user that is essentially mobile, that may be the extent of the endpoint is their laptop and the Wi-Fi or the cellular connectivity that they have. So in terms of the EdgeConnect portfolio, that would be a perfect fit for our EdgeConnect mobile, which does allow for a consistent policy that you have in your corporate environment to be pushed to the very edge of the network. Mark, was there anything that you wish to add to that?
No, I think you've summed that up really well. And, you know, the other thing as well is that other complementary solutions are much easier to adapt into the Aruba framework with that consistency of edge and policy and the extension of that edge as well. So even if you do want to bring in a different sort of, you know, mobile VPN technology or something like that, it's really, really simple and seamless to integrate.
okay. So thank you, Nick and Mark again for the presentation. And then we have another question. Can you give some use cases for use of the ClearPath feature? So
yeah, sure thing. So I had hinted that there is integration with the EdgeConnect solution and Aruba ClearPass. So at a high level, what you have seen in the past with SD-WAN policies, they are typically application-based. So we will use our deep packet inspection engine to identify applications, and you would use that to set SLAs according to which uplink you wish to send, you know, certain types of applications. And that's really the way in which SD-WAN has essentially been enacted to this point. The integration with ClearPass allows us to extend that concept and look at the role that is assigned to a user when they authenticate and authorize themselves to the network. So as an example, you may have a policy that says a particular SaaS application, we want to give a particular SLA to that. That would be an SD-WAN policy. With ClearPass integration, you could essentially say an employee that logs onto the network and is accessing this particular SaaS application gets a higher degree of performance than a guest accessing that same application because ClearPass has fingerprinted and identified them as a guest on your network. So it gives you the idea that you can use both application and role-based policies collectively to bring a richness to your overall SD-WAN policy. Hopefully that captures the question there.
okay. And there's one more. Any license is required to enable this segmentation or other security features?
Yeah, another great question. So depending on the use case, there are some degrees of licensing that enable additional capability. So as an example, in the EdgeConnect branch, so the SD branch solution, we have the idea of foundation, which brings a lot of core functionality, and then advanced, which brings some of the additional integrations, as well as the security capability like IDS and IPS. Similarly, on EdgeConnect Enterprise, there is some tiered licensing, and we'd be more than happy to follow up if there's some questions as to what is included in which of these tiers. But certainly a lot of the core functionality that we've talked about today is included in that base license. And certainly when it comes to a lot of the integrations, they are without a doubt included in those base licenses. So there's a lot of capability. It's really just how much of the additional security capability that you wish to bring into the edge environment.
Okay, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Mark, for the answering the question and the great presentation. Okay, let me have a look. There's another question from. Okay, there's another one more question. Okay, for this section, on the branch firewall replacement with Aruba SD-WAN, what will be the recommended approach to replace existing branch firewall?
Another great question. So I'm not sure if the question refers to what would be the approach to migrate, or if it would be if this is possible. So I'll perhaps answer both. Is it possible to? The answer is yes. But I think the tougher question is, how would you actually approach it? How would you migrate from a firewall to an SD-WAN functionality? And I think typically what I've seen in our customer environments where they've looked to achieve this, it has typically been to deploy the SD-WAN such that it is in line, of course, so that you get the dynamic routing capability, but you introduce firewall policies progressively over time to look to see where you can replicate what you may already have in place with your existing firewall that you're looking to, to remove. So over time, you start to move some of those policies and enforce those policies at the SD-WAN. And then at that point, you can start to understand whether or not there's any gaps in your existing firewall infrastructure. And if the idea is that you're looking to remove that infrastructure from the branch, it would be a case of, are there complementary cloud security providers that can fill that gap? Or alternatively, to some degree, looping in the prior question, is there additional capability that we can introduce on our SD-WAN to fully close out what those security requirements look like?
Okay, thank you, Nick, and thank you, Mark. We'll be the end of this webinar.